Judge Leman has ruled yes on the Taylor Swift text messages.
That the judge ruled against Blake. This is a massive, massive win for Justin.
He's going to see Blake Lively's communication with Taylor Swift.
The courtroom was ice cold, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the tension thickening with every breath. Reporters filled every corner. Legal teams sat in silence, and in the center of it all sat Blake Lively, shoulders stiff, eyes darting, lips tightly pressed. Judge Louis J. Leman looked up from his thick stack of documents and uttered the words that shattered.
And now Judge Leman has ruled fair game, okay?
So, I think Blake Lively will never forget, because that's the day Judge Louis J. Leman finally did what most of us were screaming for. He gave Justin Baldoni's legal team full access to Blake's private texts.
Blake's final wall of defense. The texts between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift are now fair game. Gasps ricocheted across.
That she was fighting, and I mean Blake Lively and Ryan had been fighting tooth and nail not to allow these messages to get into the hands of Team Baldoni. And essentially they radically filed this protective order, like, no, you cannot get this.
The courtroom. For weeks. Blake and her legal team had fought tooth and nail to keep those messages sealed, hidden from public view and legal scrutiny. But today, the last domino had fallen.
Here's the reason why he is ruling fair game. Skylar, if we can pull up page 3 of his ruling, I think is where it is. Guys, don't mind my squint. I swear it's a light, and sometimes it's hard for me to see it. Okay.
Taylor Swift, the woman Blake, once publicly called her dragon and emotional protector, had handed over the texts herself. The silence that followed was deafening. Blake didn't flinch, but her carefully composed face cracked just enough for the cameras to catch it. One corner of her eye twitched, her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the table. These weren't just casual texts, according to...
So you yourself, because you humble bragged the entire time about your closeness with Taylor Swift, one of your dragons, have now made her relevant. And I love that. I love that. Justice right there is sweet. It's like you grifted too close to the sun, baby girl, you know?
Court records and whispers from Taylor's own camp. Blake had allegedly begged Taylor to delete specific messages that could potentially reveal manipulation, dishonesty, and even attempts at obstruction of justice. Judge Leman, voice steady but sharp, read a...
Like Lively's team was coming out there trotting out a win for feminists. They were like, we did this for women everywhere. Blech. Literally, it made me want to throw up when I read that.
Loud a portion of his ruling. Public sentiment is not a shield against discovery. If you enter a name into the courtroom, that name becomes subject to examination. Blake had paraded Taylor Swift in interviews, legal filings, red carpet speeches, all part of her carefully crafted image of a brave woman standing against injustice. But now, the very image she flaunted was turning against her. As the court recessed for a break,
like I said, Blake was out there doing the absolute most, claiming victory. Oh, I've been vindicated. I'm a wonderful person. Just forget about everything that you guys read. Her PR agents were so desperate to make the public believe.
Whispers filled the room. The term Dragon Day was trending online. Social media dubbed it the day Blake's PR kingdom began to fall. Back in the hallway, Justin Baldoni's legal team smiled silently. They hadn't spoken much publicly, but today's ruling was monumental. They were now armed with Blake's private conversations, proof, they claimed, of exaggerated claims, twisted truths, and possibly malice. If proven, it could open the door for the return.
Whatever is in those messages, it completely has Blake Lively terrified. So terrified, in fact, that according to Scott Swift, she specifically asked Taylor Swift to delete some messages, and Taylor Swift would not have done that because she is not an idiot.
Of massive defamation and extortion charges. And Taylor, she remained silent. It's not a tweet, not a post. But insiders close to her father, Scott Swift, confirmed he had quietly provided dates and summaries of the texts. In one alleged exchange, Blake reportedly asked Taylor to erase messages connected to her harassment and retaliation allegations.
A massive win for Justin Baldoni, as the judge has just ruled on Today, I'm Not Your Dragon Day, that Taylor Swift's texts to Blake Lively are irrelevant.
The room felt colder now. Despite the summer heat outside, this wasn't just about legal arguments anymore. It was about betrayal. Blake had used feminism as a PR tool, they said. She had spun a partial legal win against the New York Times as a total vindication, fooling many, well, but those paying close. Attention saw through the smoke. The actual charges against her, her husband Ryan Reynolds, and their PR firm Vision were never cleared. And now, media giants once in her corner.
The requests for messages with Swift regarding the film and this action are reasonably tailored to discover information that would prove or disprove Lively's harassment and retaliation claims.
Cosmopolitan deadline. Even Marie Claire were turning. Called her celebration premature, misleading, and strategically dishonest. The texts were coming. That much was certain. And when they did, they could show the world a very different Blake Lively. Not the feminist hero. Not the silenced victim, but the orchestrator of a narrative that manipulated sympathy, fame, and even friendships. In the next hearing, if those messages lined up against her interviews, legal claims, and carefully staged press appearances, it would be game over. The judge had already warned. Obstruction will not be tolerated. Blake wasn't just fighting to win. Anymore, she was fighting to survive. Because when your entire empire is built on image, one crack can bring the whole thing down. And as for Taylor Swift, her silence spoke volumes. Maybe she wasn't Blake's dragon after all. Maybe she was the truth this courtroom had been waiting for. The courtroom reconvened. The cameras reset. Blake Lively re-entered, her posture slightly more fragile now. As if the weight of the truth had finally found her shoulders. She avoided eye contact. With the judge, with the press. With anyone. But what came next? No one expected. The court clerk announced a new exhibit. A printed exchange 3 pages long of text messages between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift. One phrase was highlighted in bold ink. Can you delete these before...
The best way to think about this case is that the Justin Baldoni hit piece originated from the CIA-protected New York Times. So on June 10th, I wasn't shocked when Judge Leman did what always happens in these matters pertaining to the New York Times/CIA lawsuits. He entirely dismissed the lawsuit against the New York Times, and then he necessarily had to dismiss any of the repeated claims that were in Blake Lively's filings.
Anyone sees them? It's getting too risky. A chill rippled through the room. Justin Baldoni's attorney stood, voice calm but laced with fire. Your Honor, this is no longer a question of defamation or retaliation. This is now a question of credibility, manipulation, and calculated deceit. He continued, pointing to a timeline projected on the courtroom screen.
That's the most important thing of all of this, because I hear all the time people say, Justin dragged her into this. No, I think Blake did, and starting with that dragon text. Calling her, little monster.
Green Blake's public statements versus the dates and tone of the messages, they didn't match, not even close. In the texts, Blake wasn't scared. She wasn't cornered. She was planning, discussing PR spins, referring to Justin's legal moves as inconvenient, mocking the emotional toll she claimed publicly at one point. Taylor's response was just one sentence. I won't delete anything. Don't put me in this. That line echoed. Loud. Powerful. Devastating. Blake's hands trembled now. Not visibly, but enough that the pen she held slipped. She caught it. But the image had been captured by every lens in the room.
And she would not have deleted them. She would have shown them to a lawyer, showed it to her PR, showed it to Daddy Swift, and they would have said, hold on, when somebody is asking you to commit a crime, you don't.
And if you still think she's got this under control...
Suddenly, the courtroom wasn't just filled with lawyers and journalists, it was filled with ghosts of truth Blake tried to bury. Ghosts now crawling back to life. Her lawyer objected, scrambling to control the narrative. These texts lack context. They're cherry-picked. But Judge Leman was having none of it. He leaned forward, tone razor-sharp. As Lively as made. This about public image. We will examine the full image and filtered. The hearing adjourned.
Blake did all of that, and that's why Taylor's not supporting her anymore.
With one last twist. Before the judge stood to leave, he addressed both legal teams. Prepare for testimony. Ms. Swift has been subpoenaed. The courtroom went nuclear. Reporters bolted for the exits. Social media exploded. Within minutes, hashtag Taylor Testifies was the top trend worldwide and outside. Blake Lively's car
But from everything that we're seeing, it's becoming clearer and clearer that Taylor Swift is crying out to the world, no, I am not your dragon.
waited engine running, but she didn't move. She sat frozen in the back seat, staring out the tinted window at a world that no longer saw her as the Golden Girl. She had built a castle out of words. And now those very words
This could be very interesting. This is kind of a trap for Blake Lively, if you ask me.
were tearing it apart one text at a time. Because in the court of law, in the court of public opinion, no shield is stronger than the truth and Taylor Swift. She wasn't just a pop star anymore. She was the witness, the dragon no one saw coming.